We're live. Hi, everyone. My name is Wendy Wecksell. I am the founder of WxL Partners. And, over the next hour or so, we're going to really guide through a practice of how to find and develop your own powerful relationship to money with this training I created called the EQ of Wealth. And I just need to give a big shout out, first off, to Divines.nyc, an amazing women's community that really focuses in New York based on celebrating the divine feminine. And what is more feminine in the 21st century than women making tons of money? So over the next hour, I just really hope that through this training and through our time together, there's one piece that really connects for you so that you are able to walk away and think through, how can I develop a more powerful relationship to money? So let's get started. And so how many people know what EQ is? So this is like, reflect on your own experience. What is EQ? So emotional intelligence. But have you heard the phrase EQ and wealth in the same sentence? So this could be new, and it probably is new because I made it up. So I really created this curriculum and training based on something that I saw wasn't being met based on my own lived experience, what I was professionally trained in, and then also this real opportunity that individuals, families, and women in particular were missing out of in order to really earn, move, and raise tons of money. And so just to set a little bit of ground rules for yourself during this time, have self-respect. Really be kind to yourself. Know that whatever is going to be said, I hope it's well received. And ultimately, a big thing for me is fun. And the reason for that is that fun and play are really important for learning. And especially as we're going to talk through that money can be a physiological experience, so a physical experience on our bodies, the experience of fun and play and enjoyment can also be really healing when it comes to building a powerful relationship with money. Openness, so this will be online in some respects, but be open with yourself and have deep curiosity around your own experience, because ultimately this is about your own self-discovery. This is about you becoming empowered, and whether or not you have a complicated relationship or a really great relationship, this is going to be for you to just even get to the next level of your relationship with wealth, with money, because in the 21st century, women should be owning all of it, in my opinion. So what are we going to talk through today? So we're going to run through my EQ of wealth story, which is really why I created this, right? Why is this something that is uniquely a mission that I decided to take on? But also this is going to be mostly about you. And so this is about reflecting on your past and how we create and shape our relationship with money and how that comes about, and then owning our present. So this is the real opportunity of how we can shape our future. And so in the Building Your Powerful Future, I'm going to run through 3 things that are small things that I have found that over time can really transform and become power and really allow us to become more powerful when it comes to wealth, money, and ultimately our lives. And then, we will have a Q&A portion. And so we're going to start with my story. And so my EQ of wealth story starts with my grandfather, who is pictured here. And this is at my bat mitzvah. And so I'm Jewish, and I was 13 years old there. And my grandfather was a self-made man, and he still is my hero. I miss him every day. And he was a man who grew up very poor in Williamsburg in New York. And so if you live or if you know of someone who lives in New York today, Williamsburg is a very nice neighborhood, but at the time it was a Jewish ghetto. And he earned his wealth through becoming a physician. But at the time, Jews were prohibited from going to medical school, because this is before World War II. This is the height of anti-Semitism. And the way that he got into medicine was actually, and this is going to sound a little strange, but he joined a Jewish gang. Because if you were a young man in a poor neighborhood typically have to know how to defend yourself. And so he was the person, they called him Weasel, who was able to sew people up. And so he always had this deep sense of healing about him. And the way that he got into medical school was that he was so brilliant that he taught at the medical school, but he wasn't allowed to get his degree. And so the students at the school and also the secretary to the dean, who was a woman, said, they basically said, we won't work here and we won't study here if he can't learn alongside with us. And my grandfather really understood the importance of giving to others because doors were open for him. And, I remember my dad told me recently that when the war broke out, so World War II, so mind you, my grandmother is Austria off the boat, and we have relatives on that side who died in the Holocaust. My grandfather enlisted in the Army Corps, which at the time was the Joint Air Force and Army. And his job was to take care of POWs. And, as a German-speaking doctor, he took care of Nazis. And I just think so much about how much he deeply cared about taking care of people in community. And that was something that really was passed along to me. And that's how his relationship with money was really formed. I mean, he was a brilliant physician who had his own private practice. At the same time, how he created his wealth was he loved the markets, and he was the millionaire next door. He lived quite humbly. He didn't renovate his home. He had the same car for 20 years, but he really understood the power of compounding and the power of giving to people that he loved. And so when he passed, when I was 21, he left me a trust fund. And that all sounds fantastic. And so whereas my grandfather had a great relationship with money, unfortunately, within my immediate family, money was incredibly contentious. And so, my regret, and I say it's a regret because I can't undo it. And according to the research, we regret far more, not what we have done, but what we didn't do. And so I regret not sitting down with my grandfather and having those really positive interactions around how the financial markets work and really learning from him, but instead really being shaped by the negative experiences and not talking about money and being very much afraid of any sort of discussion that involved money because of that. Because of what I was how money was presented within my immediate family. At the same time, by the way, at 28, I went through the entire thing because one of the ways that I dealt with this really emotional experience of money was that I rebelled against my father by spending it, and I spent money to feel good. And so I never looked at my bank account, and so I avoided it, which is actually, I realize now, a sign of stress response. And so I put myself in a big self-sabotaging position, and I knew so clearly, I was like, I am a very smart person. Why did I make such bad decisions? And it's because money's an emotional experience. At the same time, on the professional side, I love seeing how money can be used towards creating social change and being put towards visionaries. And I think money is such a powerful force. And so, that same year where I found out that I went through my entire trust fund through a family's wealth advisor who I only spoke to twice, I was also hugely, at the same time, very successful at raising money. And so this is me at my first fundraising job and my first nonprofit job at a great organization called Pencils of Promise. And so I, at the time, raised millions of dollars, as well as since then have raised millions of dollars, and also have coached other people how to raise, engage, and move, millions, and recently over $100 million. And so it's this really interesting thing, like the EQ of wealth is really this understanding of like money can be really emotional and complicated. At the same time, it's hugely powerful. And I saw that money was complicated, not just within my own family, but within a lot of families. And so, what is true is that with actions, what prevents actions usually is an emotional experience. So I feel afraid. I don't want to talk to my father about that or my mother about that. Because if we were logical beings, we would always ask out the person we have a crush on. We would all go to the gym every day. We would be, making sure we see the dentist, every 6 months. And so we are logical beings. And so what I found is that once we get to the root and why this training was created, once we get to the root of what holds back action, then we can unlock enormous resources and potential. And the thing that I find deeply beautiful, and what the message that I want to put out about the power of the money when it comes to relationships, is that even though the messaging that I got was that money was contentious, and we'll get through where that sort of came from once we break down, how that relationship is shaped, I want to put out the message that money is deep connection. Because, the really powerful thing about money is that it is a huge part of relationships. And, to the point where, one of the top predictors of divorce are early arguments about money. And so if we're not talking about money, like what was my experience growing up, what things that are not talked about is the perfect petri dish for shame to exist. And so whatever becomes shameful becomes something that we think about that is bad. And also we're missing out on deep points of connection with others. And so we're missing out in a culture of transparency, not just with our families, but also with our colleagues, with our business partners, because that culture of transparency is ultimately where we build trust long term. And so if we're not talking about money, which is a huge force in the world, we're also not talking about where, if we're really struggling, or maybe, we're going through a loss or addiction. At the same time, we're also not really delving into the importance of our dreams and our hopes and our desires. And so for me, I also see money as this amazing opportunity for love and connection, because it is something that is usually not spoken about. And that is what I really want to put out there. And so before we get into it, I just want to think through if anyone has any questions, or if there's just something that's coming up for you. And, just take in, like, this was my story. This is why I do it. But like, what's sort of coming up for you? And with that, this is where we're going to start to get really engaged on you. That was about reflecting on my past. And if there are any questions, Sophia, I probably will need you to share them, because it's hard for me to present and go back and forth. But, in terms of, this is the part of the presentation that's going to be all about you. This is going to be about, where is my relationship to money shaped? How has it been shaped? So I will say, I truly believe everything can change. And it's interesting. Whenever I hear that, oh, that's never going to change, they're always going to be the same, that's also a sign of toxicity. And I have just not seen that. I think that if we want to change, it can change, and our brains can change. We have neuroplasticity, anything can change. And so, but in order to do that, we have to know, how did we get here? How was my relationship to money formed? And by the way, if it was great, it can be better. And if it, is complicated, it can be really healthy. And so the 3 ways that our relationship to money has been formed is generational. That's what's inherited. That's what did we see through our family. Experiential is what happened to us. And then societal is what's learned. What did we see in the world, and how did those unconscious messages sort of dig in? And so this is going to be a quick exercise. And I will say, if you have a pen and paper, please get that. There will be several times throughout this experience and this learning environment where you will get the chance to reflect now, and then also later on in the presentation. So generational. So this is what's inherited. So these are my grandparents. This is my grandfather, a bit younger, as you can tell. And this is my grandmother. And I just they loved each other. I just so love how he looks at her in this. And, I will say, whereas my grandfather had this incredibly positive relationship with money and wanted his grandchildren to get into finance. And I think I've gotten into finance in a tangential way. My grandmother was off a boat from Austria, and she came here speaking Yiddish, which is a niche Jewish German dialect. She did, as a supportive wife, it was very much about her supporting my father. She didn't get her college degree. Thank goodness, though, she did. What resilience in her 80s. And she also, they were shaped through the Depression. And so she had a deep scarcity mentality. And that is actually what was passed down into my family. And so that's what I actually grew up with. And so what was your parents, grandparents, or caregivers' relationship to money? This could be, maybe you would talk about it at the dinner table and with great passion, or maybe it was something you never spoke about. Were there comments like, oh, wealth will make you evil? Like, or is it, or was there a constant sort of flexing of what you had? And so what was that? So just start to pay attention and write that down. And I will say you can always come back to these questions and pause this in the recording of it. But for the purposes, we're going to just move on to the next one. And then experiential, gotta love the Benjamins. This is what's lived. This is what we've been through. And so what were your early memories around money? Were they positive or negative? It's so interesting. Our brains, when we get a big emotional experience, it tends to really stick. And so whether it's a wedding and a beautiful occasion, or maybe a car accident, that is going to stay with us. So, were your early memories around money? Was it, I have a friend, and she was a fellow panelist of mine, on the Divine panel, and she had a great relationship with money. And when she was 8 years old, she went to a bank with her mom and opened up a bank account, and it felt like a great field trip. And so it is no wonder that she became a private wealth advisor. For her, it was this early memory of fun. Whereas I know someone else where her early memories around money were seeing her mother on the kitchen floor crying because she didn't know how she would pay the bills. And so there was this deep sense of fear that it could all go away and that it was unsafe. And so what were those memories that you had for you? And so this is, once again, this is going to be just the beginning of the reflection. These are also questions that you can take away and sort of go on a walk and really think through as well. And then the last piece is societal. What is learned? And the reason I'm laughing is because I chose this photo for a reason. It's middle-aged white man, middle-aged white man, middle-aged white man, middle-aged white man. And so what were the money messages you received through culture? Who was on the cover of Fortune, Forbes? Who was in leadership positions? What music were you able to listen to? Who were in the films that you got to see? Did you see yourself? And so those unconscious messages also stick with us. Do I belong here? Where do I belong to be at the table? So one of the unconscious messages that I got was that the one other time besides finding out that at 28 that I went through my trust fund, when I was 8 years old, I went to my parents' family wealth advisor, and I just remember that all the women were secretaries, that none of them were in the room. And so what were those messages that you took in? And maybe continue to take in. And so that this is could be a much longer exercise, but the end goal, and this is a longer practice of how can you find gratitude for how this shaped you. That probably isn't a today thing, but that is the ultimate ownership of that. Because I think for me, in really developing the EQ of wealth, the most powerful thing and liberating moment was actually being really grateful for what happened and sharing my sort of next gen story that went awry, because it's ultimately what gave me the power to teach. And so whatever our relationship is, if it was painful, know that that is your power, and it's sort of a route to purpose. At the same time, if you've had a great relationship, find gratitude for it, because ultimately that's going to make you more powerful, because gratitude is a key exercise and tool to calm your body down. And in order to get you into a really a good feeling state, which we're going to talk through next, is vital when it talks about feeling powerful when it comes to money and our relationships. And, one of the things that this also develops as we're thinking through how this shaped us is like our thoughts. And so, there's a quote, something to the effect of like, beware your thoughts because they become your words, and beware your words because they become your actions. And so it's really true. So what are the thoughts that are running through your head? Is it money is bad? There is never enough. I could never make that. Wealth makes you unhappy. Nothing good comes from having money. That is too much. It's all going away. I don't deserve that. So it's interesting for me. And once again, it's so interesting how the psychology eventually can become what we live. The thoughts to words, to actions, and to destiny. For me, it's all going away. That was something that I would think about, and ultimately it's something that I lived. And with that said, this is all shiftable. And I'll say I live today in very much an abundance mindset. So money is freedom. There is always enough. I so deeply believe that. I am worthy of wealth. So this is the one that I've had to learn and relearn and relearn. And there's a quote by young Pueblo that I love. That's something to the effect of, if the wound was deep, you will have to let it go many times. And so this is a constant practice. So I am worthy of wealth. For me, that was very much tied to love and being worthy of love, because it was a very much a family experience. So I am worthy of wealth. Wealth allows you to make an impact 100%. Wealth makes your life easier. There has been data to really prove that recently. That is perfect. Whatever you have, whatever the amount is, it's all, unfolding exactly as it should. Compounding is a magical experience, unless it's, we're talking about debt. But for everyone that, if you're taking this webinar and if you are listening to this recording, compounding is magical, and it is going to be in the positive direction. And I deserve that and more, the deserving of the wealth and abundance, no matter what your experiences are. That's where we really want to land. And so, which of these beliefs are resonating with you? Which of those are you like, oh, that's me, or maybe I should really aspire for that? At the same time, which ones, maybe there are some that I didn't mention, but just really start to just pay attention to what's landing, what do you really want to achieve, and what doesn't feel right. And once again, this is a sort of a fast track into building a powerful relationship with money, but ultimately this is a longer learning experience in order to really take ownership of it. And so owning the present is the now. This is the magic. This is the opportunity. And I approach this differently. And the reason I approach this differently is because I actually think of the present as a physiological experience. So knowing that our past stays in our bodies and it's sort of imprinting in us. So for example, because money was something we never spoke about, I avoided it. I didn't look at my bank account. Whenever I had to, I felt deep uneasiness. And that was a real physical experience. And so being able to get from a sympathetic stress response to parasympathetic rest and digest is the number one thing I teach, because that is how we can actually change our body chemistry to allow us to have a different present and ultimately a more auspicious future. And so what is stress response to rest and digest, or sympathetic to parasympathetic? So stress response, we are ancient beings. We are meant to be, we are hunter-gatherer DNA, but we live in a modern world. And so our bodies are meant to really understand the idea of threat. And so threat is stress response, or sort of run away. Luckily, hopefully everyone that is listening to this and taking this in, hopefully this isn't a life and death situation. You're living in a place where you have that safety, that baseline of safety. And so, however, in this modern world, the anxiety and the things that happen to us can get us into stress response. So stress response is an elevated heart rate. It's also oxygen is being flowing to our calves and to our heart, because what was the goal? The goal was to run. And so, but where isn't the oxygen going? It's not going to our brains. And so therefore, in stress response, we are not making logical decisions. We are not fully able to take the actions of the outcomes that allow for the outcomes that we want In rest and digest, this is the state that we're in, before we go to sleep. It's also not just digesting of food, but I'll say what I think about is the metaphoric idea of digesting of ideas, digesting what people are taking, what we can take in from others. And so it is nearly impossible to have a conversation if someone is in stress response, because you don't take the other person in. And so in order to really have money be this, conduit of connection and not this place of confrontation, you have to know how to really calm yourself down and have it be this place of rest and digest. And so I think it's also really important to know what stress response looks like. I mean, this is all can get a bit esoteric or, heady, I should say. And so this comes from the work of self-compassion from Dr. Chris Germer and also Dr. Kristen Neff. And so stress response is also fight, flight, freeze. And so what this looks like, especially like when directed towards self. So fight is criticism, which can also be self-criticism. So I'm so bad at this. Or maybe someone's criticizing you, like, oh, you always do this. Like, no, be aware of the always and the never statements. Those are really, really toxic for relationships. We always want to make sure that we give people the opportunity to change. Flight is isolation, but it's like really, self-isolation avoidance. So this is where I think about not looking at my bank account. I was really just trying to push away what was true and isolate myself and keep myself siloed. And then freeze, there's the anxiety. And so anxiety is like I think we all know what anxiety is, but it's also the thoughts that keep coming. They don't go away. It's like, oh, when we talked through the scarcity mentality, it's those thoughts that keep running through your head. And ultimately where we want, in order to get to that abundance mentality and have those thoughts become our words, become our actions, become our destiny, we need to calm down. And so we're going to do a little bit of an exercise to really think through, what does stress response look like on me? Because once again, we all react differently, and so in order to actually respond in a way that's really optimal for us, it's important to understand what it looks like so we can recognize it. That's like the number one thing, is to recognize it. So here are 3 situations that we're going to talk through that can be really activating around money. So, and each situation could, whether or not it relates to you or not, just imagine, we're going to play into our imaginations. We're going to play here. So a raise. So you find out that a colleague is making much more than you, or maybe you find out that a friend of yours who's the same age is making a lot more than you, or someone in a different industry is making a lot more than you. The goal here is the comparison. And so I just want you to close your eyes and to think about that situation and what is happening. So where is the tenseness in your body? So is your stomach tensing? Are you noticing potentially that your palms are getting sweaty? What is running through your head? Just start to notice. And then let it go. And just start to, once again, pay attention. If you want, you can even write it down. And then the next scenario is a bill. So you have a huge credit card bill, or just a huge payment, and a low bank balance. And, what's happening here? So close your eyes. Is your heart rate increasing? What do you feel like you want to, run away? Literally, are you moving around? Where is the tenseness in your body? What is clenching? Are your teeth together? Just start to notice. And then let it go. And open your eyes when you're ready. And once again, there will be a recording, so you can just also do this and come back to this. And then the last one is, I think this is really important to point out, that it doesn't matter what what you have in your bank account, whether you have lots of money or quote unquote no money. People can have a complicated relationship with money, and it's an emotional experience. And so for me, this is something that I found when I used to have this amazing apartment. And so when new people see how you live and make comments, and so this is, maybe someone comes in and sees how you live and they're like, wow, you're really rich. Like, how do you afford this? Do you want to give me money? And like, are you worried that that relationship is going to change? That you're going to be judged? And so just close your eyes. And so what are the thoughts that are running through your head? Where are things clenching? Where is the contraction? How is your breath? And just start to notice. And then open your eyes and let it go. And so all of this, these scenarios are really just to start to replicate and understand how your body reacts to when money and relationships and wealth and all this sort of interact, because it's in that recognizing that it's happening. And this is really the practice of mindfulness, which is also very important to Dr. Chris Germer and Dr. Kristen Neff's work on self-compassion. In the mindfulness, in the present moment, if I can recognize that this is what's happening, I can relax into it. And so I'm more likely to get into that rest and digest state. And I'm also far more likely to create those actions and have the outcomes that really allow me to be powerful. And so we're going to do a very small, simple breath practice, because it's also like, okay, this is all great. I now have an idea of what stress response looks like on me, but how do I shift it? If I'm getting into that stress response, how am I becoming powerful to get into that rest and digest so that I can make the actions that allow me to be at my best state? And so the thing that I love, and there are many different ways to do this, I should say, there are many different ways to go from a sympathetic to a parasympathetic state. But the one that I love is a very simple breath practice. And the reason for that is because, especially when it comes to money, you're probably going to be doing it in community. So what does that mean? That means you might be talking to your boss, you might be talking to your family, your partner, your business partners. And so it's not the type of situation where you can just go up and go for a walk for 20 minutes or do exercise. All great ways to really calm your system down, but they require you to leave the room. And so this is a practice that allows you to be present with the people who you love while becoming powerful. And so the thing to know about the breath is that if you want to slow your heart rate, so one of the things around a rest and digest state is that you have a slower heart rate. And so if you want to slow it down, a slow breath slows down the heart rate. And also make sure that you breathe through your nose. And the reason for that, so if we look at our nostrils, and I think our bodies are just so incredibly powerful and beautiful and intelligently designed. If we look at our nostrils, they look like, there are two of them, and they're oval shaped, they look like pears. What do they also look like? They look like our lungs. And so the direct passageway to our lungs is through our nose. Whereas our mouths are great for speaking and for digestion, but not necessarily respiration. It can excite the nervous system, whereas nasal breathing could calm us down. And so I'm just going to do a really simple breath practice. So if you can, I want you to lips together, teeth apart, and put the tongue to the roof of the mouth. So when I say roof, I mean, right above your two front teeth. And the reason I want your teeth to be apart is because clenching is a sign of stress response. It's a sign of tenseness. And so lips together, teeth apart, tongue to the roof of the mouth. And we're just going to do a very simple three-part breath count. And the reason I love a count is because it allows our mind to focus on something. Because if one of the signs of stress response is the anxiety and the thoughts coming back and back, this creates the break in the thoughts so that you can actually focus on a number. So we'll do this together. So inhale, 1, 2, 3. Exhale, 1, 2, 3. Inhale, 1, 2, 3. Exhale, 1, 2, 3. Inhale, 1, 2, 3. Exhale, 1, 2, 3. And then just let it go and notice. I feel a bit more calmer just leading you through it. But just see that, like, even in those little moments, if you just have a breath count, you're able to be where you are, be with the people you love, and get to the place where you can become the most powerful. And I actually believe that if we're able to really have ownership of our physiological experience, that is how we separate our net worth from our self-worth. Because then it doesn't matter whatever amount of money we're talking about, it doesn't affect me. And I am free and liberated from the expectations of a certain amount. And I know that who I am is actually what matters most. And at least that's been true from my lived experience. And so I just want you to also just take a moment and think through, like, we just went through a lot of material, some, exercises. What's coming up for you? What are the questions that you are sort of ruminating on? And here, ruminating, I guess, simmer on. And just take note of them. You can also put them in the chat, or you can also just write them down. And one of the things I deeply believe in is that you are your own greatest teacher. So much of my coaching is not about, it isn't about coming to me. It's about you finding your own wisdom. And that's the ultimate power, is that you have the independence to create the actions that are most desirable for the future that you want to have. And ultimately the relationships you want to have. I mean, I think so much of this is about wealth and love and happiness and health. And so this is, now that we know how to shift the present to get a different future, we're going to talk about 3 things that I do to there are actions that allow us to have a more powerful future. And the really important thing about action, I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding around the actions that matter. And similar to compounding, and I will say compounding is very much like a term of finance, like, the magic of compounding, just let that interest over time grow and it will be, exponential. That is also true of everything else. When it, the science and the research around trust and what makes meaningful relationships over decades that are loving and supportive is the small moments over time. That's also how we change our habits, small moments over time. And so it is actually not in the big moments, but in the smallest of moments that we have the opportunity to change and transform our lives. And that is a hugely optimistic thing. And that is true according to all of the research. And so these are 3 actions that we're going to talk through that are small moments that can really make a difference over time. So blessing bank accounts, we'll talk about. These are all 3 things that I should say that I do. Saying thank you. So this is when receiving money, saying thank you and dancing, which I think is so fun. And I'll tell you why I do that. And then wealthy time, something I do every Wednesday and Sunday. And so when I say blessing bank accounts, I also want to talk through first, like, what does it mean to grow your savings account? So this isn't like a physical savings account. This is an emotional savings account. So one of the things about relationships is that as we are logical beings, as we are emotional beings, in order for any relationship to feel good, in order for the experience of a relationship to be very positive for us, we need to have a hugely outsized number of positive interactions with someone. It is because we have this negativity bias that really dampens it, in the same way that if we have a great day and someone says something to us that ticks us off, we're going to remember that thing, even though everything else might have gone well. So it's so important when we're talking about building a really powerful relationship with money that's loving and supportive, and was supportive with the people we care about, is to really build up positive interactions with money and wealth. So coming back to blessing bank accounts. So every day I look at every single investment account, savings account, checking account, credit card statement. And I just have this real moment of gratitude, because, where I was once avoidant, I'm like, I am really taking appreciation for it. And so that is also shifting my nervous system, because it's creating that Pavlovian learned experience of this is actually a great thing to be exposed, because ultimately when I do have enormous amounts of money and wealth, it's going to be a lot about knowing what's in there. And then, saying and this is also with receiving money, saying thank you and dancing. So, it's so interesting. Like, our strength becomes our weakness because we overwork it. And so I'm a very generous person. This is why in many ways I worked in philanthropy. I would be too generous. So this is how I got into a tough state in my 20s, was that I would do things for free. I would give away more money than I should. And so it was the generosity that actually got a big part of my generosity that got me in trouble. And so I had to learn how to receive wealth and money, and to have the receiving be a beautiful experience. And so when I get paid, I say thank you. And like, in any way, I'm like, I say thank you, whether if it's to a person or to myself, and I dance. And the reason I dance is, yes, I love to dance, but this is also about reprogramming our physiological state, our nervous system. And so what does dancing do? It lowers cortisol levels, which is cortisol is present in stress response. It increases dopamine, and it increases endorphins, which are feel-good chemicals. So also by having this literally like engaging physical experience that's enjoyable, my body is saying, oh, it is great to receive money. Oh yeah, we want more of this. I will say I love to dance. I think dancing is really important. But if you're like, okay, I really don't want to dance, what is something else that's really enjoyable for you that gives you that chemical experience of that receiving money is a beautiful thing. And then the last thing is wealthy time. So this is a practice I do every Wednesday and Sunday, and technically it's financial planning and accounting. But I call it wealthy time because for me, it's about the why. It's about, why am I doing this? To build a really healthy experience and toolkit around wealth. And so one of the things that I used to do is I was very unconscious about what I was spending. And so one of the really beautiful things about money, and why I sort of love and I'm passionate about moving resources, is that money is powerful when it aligns with our values. And so, when I say do like Marie Kondo, it's like, does this money bring you joy? Are you spending money on things that really feed you? And so, in addition to using Mint and QuickBooks, I actually physically write out what I've spent. And this is a screenshot that I created. And I put it in bright colors, and I try and make it fun, because ultimately fun and play is also a great experience on our nervous system and a great way to learn, a highly effective way to learn. So, there are a couple of things that I do, which is, I list out the date of what I spent. Like, I go through my credit card statements and my bank accounts and I see what I spent, but I also write out if it was over between $50 and $100, it's in a shade of gray. If it's over 100, it's in the shade of yellow. And then I take note. I was like, did I like this? Was this something that was really, really important to me? And so what this does over time, and I've been doing this for many, many years now, is that I am so intentional about where my money is going that very rarely is it, oh, it doesn't feel good. Usually it's, oh yeah, that was worth it. Oh yeah, that was great. But even if it's not, I have to check it every couple of days on a Wednesday and Sunday. And so it's almost like a journaling practice that I love. And so just to recap, and as we're building this really positive relationship with money and wealth, and going to be, living our best lives, because that's the goal, reach our potential, do good things in the world, is to pay attention to the physical. I mean, it is the number one thing if we want wealth and happiness in our lives, and loving relationships and health. They are all connected. And so much of that is going from a stress response to rest to digest. How am I literally in a good place to take someone in and to take myself in? And start small. I mean, that is what it's like. It's not what is the big stuff. It's what is the small stuff. What is actually going to entice me to take action? Because it is in those small moments that we change our lives, and trust the compounding of the change. It is those small things over time that will transform. And so just once again, beware of the small. And with those three things, you will develop a powerful relationship with money. It is just going to happen. And I'll say also pay attention to the physical when you're in those interactions and in those reflection points of when you're whether you're talking about money with your family, or whether you're someone saying something, making a comment, whether you're looking at your bank statement. get into the physical, get into the physical, get into the physical. It'll also allow you to get out of your mental way. And so if this is how to get in touch with me, if you're like, wow, I'm really craving more information like this, my email, Instagram, I will say I'm not so active on Instagram with this content. And then my LinkedIn, and then here's my website. And, we're going to have a Q&A. Also you can have a journaling time for yourself to think through what makes the most sense. And if you have questions, I welcome them. And so I just want to give everyone a big thank you. And let me know. Oh, Astrid has her hand raised. Okay.
Oh, no, I just had from the beginning. Thank you so much, Wendy. I definitely have a ton of reflection to do on money, my past relationship with money, the inherited sort of emotional relationship, the lived experience that you walked through, and then sort of the future and how to deal with that body emotion and recognize that. I'm also not really looking at my bank accounts. I'm also very generous with friends, and then I don't really look at it. So it's about like accepting to receive money. So thank you very much, Wendy, for this really
you're so welcome. C'est un plaisir. No, I just want to say thank you so much. I mean, I am so grateful for everyone and your time. We talk about money being a value, but ultimately it's the time. And so I'm really honored to be in community with you. I want to say thank you. This content will also be online, and you can, record it. You could do it again if you want to walk through it and see and go through the exercises together. And I wish everyone a really beautiful rest of your day. And thank you so much.